Right, hi there. I was on a panel session a little bit earlier with 4 other people, so I now sort of feel like the guy who used to be in a band with a whole load of people, and now I've gone out solo. So it's a little bit daunting being on the stage in that state. But I was approached by a board member recently of an organization who had a sort of burning desire and great need within the organization to do something with data and do it in a way that drives a bunch of opportunity and to monetize their data in some way. And he was after the sort of standard things you would expect a board member to be after in terms of better visibility of his company performance, in terms of metrics that help him drive the business. He wants to have a bunch of metrics that he can use as levers to influence how the business operates, but he also is sort of hoping that there's a bunch of opportunity locked away within the data that he's got to help him with all sorts of opportunities and with the business and with the operations. He also is a private equity-backed company. They also had huge revenue growth targets. They wanted to double their growth over the next couple of years and knew that data was going to be one of the key ways to grow, to have such big sort of growth that they're going after. So he came to me and he talked to me about, look, how do we go about this? I don't know where to start. So anyway, we sort of went into the organization, spoke and met with a whole load of people, and as it turns out, they had done loads of stuff with data. They'd invested in a data discovery tool, one that begins with Q that aren't exhibiting here. They'd done a whole load of stuff with dashboarding. They put metrics across the business. They had the sales team with reams of dashboards. They had reports all over the place. They tried to do some stuff on master data. They had metrics going up to the board. And they felt, certainly in the troops, that they were getting insight and they had sort of a good start. So there's a sort of disconnect here between what the board is after in terms of how they go after data opportunities, what had been delivered, and what the vision is for that this board member had. And this is a fairly common challenge that I see going into lots of organizations where there's a desire and a drive and maybe some things have been done, but the organization's still not getting value for some reason in some way. The solution generally to solve this problem is around skills, and more specifically around the leadership that's needed to help influence the business and drive the organization forward from a data perspective. The big data and analytics space has loads of facets to it. I've added analytics to the end of that big data phrase, and there's a whole bunch of stuff and innovation happening around artificial intelligence and deep learning, building algorithms, data science. This is a world of science and maths, and lots of these problems are solved with science and maths. To understand the facts, and based on those facts, you can infer some things. You can build some probabilities. You can build some propensity models to help understand, what's the right outfit to sell someone, what's the right song to present up in Spotify, help Amazon sell us more stuff that we either need or don't really need. And so this is like a real maths and science economy. So in this world of sort of maths and science, I find it like hugely fascinating that actually where organizations are most successful and the thing that adds the most value is in the sort of the art and mastery and leadership that's needed, that's wrapped around all of these sort of smart algorithms, if you like, and to really drive the value through. So, and what we find is that organizations that have the right mix of leadership skills and create an agenda which is data-driven, that's where people get things more right more often. So we're going to have a look at a few leadership personas needed to succeed with big data. And I guess one point is when I talk about leadership, I'm not necessarily talking about some sort of hierarchical boss or set of bosses. This is about general leadership skills and capability needed in an organization to lead the agenda. So first up, strategy guy. I really like this guy. This lead is fundamental to sort of establishing the vision for how data is used with the organization and making really sure that it's tightly aligned with the strategic objectives that organization has. The leader needs to work with the board members to ensure that sort of top-down data is seen as a corporate asset and in its own right generates some incremental business value. Organizations can find big data difficult at best and scary, I guess, at worst. And part of the job of this strategy guy is to sort of help dispel the myths and help sort of unpick the complexities that come with the maths and science of algorithms and data science and bring it back to some sort of fundamental truths about how data can add value and which business opportunities or problems are the best ones to go after in using data. So we all know a vision without a plan is just a great idea, and so with that sort of strategy, and the strategy guy needs to also think about and come up with a plan of attack about how they're going to start with where they are and move the organization forward to where they want to come to, and put an approach around it that enables them to be agile, responsive, iterative, and proactive with how they do that. So ultimately, the strategy guy is here to shape and drive the agenda for turning an organization into a data-driven one. Right, next up, the change agent. So everyone here works for an organization, whether that's public or private sector, or a startup or an established corporate player. And very few people, I would imagine, would say they are against change. Sort of show of hands, who's against change? Oh no, he's scratching his head. He's against change. You may even be outwardly and vocally supporting change, but when it comes down to it, the reality of making change within an organization and re-anchoring people's mindset about how data can be used and fundamentally shifting how data is seen and used within an organization is actually quite a hard thing, and it's a hard thing to make happen. So becoming data-driven organization after sort of years of being a sort of a gut feel organization, one that uses best guesses or intuition or their experience, using historic metrics, looking backwards, often having sort of siloed parts of the organization, that requires change, and genuine change is a challenge. So this guy is about being very culturally aware. She needs to understand the politics of the organization, be able to build relationships across and up and down the organization. She needs to be able to seek out other agents for change and create a bunch of friends that she can drive change, create champions within the organization that can come along the journey with them to help with this data-driven world that they're trying to get to. She needs to be able to articulate the vision that strategy guys set and influence peers and colleagues and other leaders to get behind this strategy. And they drink a bucket load of coffee because they're meeting so many people, and it's a really cool job to have. Right, the technologist. And I feel slightly sorry for the technologist, certainly in my presentation, because he gets one slide, and we're in a conference which is fairly tech-focused. But actually, only one of the bullet points about how do you do big data is sort the tech. And whilst it's a very fundamental part, it is only one part, as you'll see as I move through. But this guy loves tech. He loves what technology can do. He knows what the market is like for data storage, data discovery, data science, data integration tools, personalization engines, digital marketing platforms, and all those sorts of things. He knows how to articulate the benefits of going open source versus going proprietary. He knows the right things to consider when choosing to go an internal bespoke build versus buying something off the shelf. He has a thirst for learning and understanding about the different technologies in the market, and who the new players are, who the established players are, and keeping abreast of sort of technology acquisitions, and also importantly, who to not look at and ignore. And sorry if there's any exhibitors here. He knows how to apply, when and how to apply sort of innovative tech startup propositions to the data challenge, and when to go with an established player, and that depends on sort of the use case. But based on all of that, and above all else, this leader needs to lead an organization through the right technology decision that's right for the use case that is in play, but also that fits into the overall data and analytics strategy, and be best buddies with the CIO to make sure that it sort of fits in with a wider technology agenda and strategy that the CIO has. Now, these two guys, actually, the guy on the top left, which obviously I presume everyone knows who is, I was showing my wife my presentation, and I got some people in the room who know my wife, so you can't tell her I said this. I said to her, do you know who that is? And she said, I think it's the Microsoft guy, which I thought was brilliant, because it was so right and so wrong all at the same time. Anyway, we all know it's Steve Jobs, and I've got to read a quote here. So, Tell to Win author Peter Guber said about Jobs, Jobs' job was story. He knows his devotees can't just be customers. He needs apostles for his products who tell his story as their own and move it forward. So to do that great storytelling, you need two things. The story needs to have recall, and it needs to motivate some sort of action and reaction. And stories need to have impact. They need to have emotional resonance, they need to have relevancy, and it needs to have a lasting impact. Now the other guy, anyone? Disney, yes. Whoever said that is Walt Disney. Now, he doesn't need much introduction in terms of storytelling, but is like the absolute master in creating a story and experiences that people remember. Sort of a more attainable person than these two people to make this point. I don't know who was here yesterday, but Andy Cockgreve from Tableau did an awesome presentation on visualization, data discovery, and sort of visual analytics. He was an absolute master at crafting a story with data and using visualization techniques and the science of how sort of humans consume information to tell a story. So I'm not saying you need to be a Jobs or a Disney when it comes to big data, but it is relevant to big data leadership because storytelling is one of the most powerful techniques that we can use to articulate insight from the data. You know, this isn't about rocking up to the CMO and the data scientists explaining the statistical algorithm that they chose to understand some sort of customer experience. It's about laying out how the customer journey of a customer, for example, has led to some sort of change in their behavior and the things that the organization has done to drive that. So storytelling can be a really important element to make change stick and help people come along the journey with you. So we've had the leadership skills that define the strategy. And we've had the change agent sort of influencing the agenda, making friends, drinking coffee. We've had the tech guy who knows about the tools and which ones we go for. We've even had a storyteller that helps craft the story and help drive the change agenda. What about the skills that sort of actually does the work, that actually gets the insights, creates the platform, that enables the organization to sort of get a handle on all that data? So the analyst, arguably the only leader, well, certainly so far, that can actually find the nuggets of insight that drive the understanding and therefore the change, which is the most important thing. The one that knows about which analytical techniques to use, whether that's a k-means or a random forest, the one that knows how to turn a desire for some sort of prediction about what customers might do into a propensity model that feeds the marketing engine that drives out some marketing material that's relevant. The one that can craft the results into a presentable, arguably, format to visualize the answer, and the one that sort of has the overall vision of how you transform that strategy and use cases that you want to go after into insight. That's pretty damn important. So one of the analyst's best mates is this dude, the big data guy, the data leader, and his role is to design and lead the work to create sort of constant flow of data in, around, and potentially out of the organization. Each business use case has its sort of own set of requirements and requires multiple sets of data potentially. So we need to find that data, whether that's internally, externally, on-premise, in the cloud, wherever, get that data and turn it into a usable form for the analysts to then use to build models and gain insight for other systems to exploit. This guy needs to build a framework for the data engineers to work within to ensure consistency and accuracy and cleanliness and supportability and all those good things about data routines. They need to be able to look at new and different data sources that can complement standard data sets to drive a new angle on a new bit of insight that they want to go after, and needs to create an agile framework that caters for the sort of test and learn principles that you need with trialing out different algorithms and trialing out different models. They work really closely with their analyst buddies to iteratively develop data sets, models, and code that enables business questions to be asked and insight to be gained. Sort of in the e-commerce world, the sort of concept of DevOps is the one that sort of defines the end-to-end flow of build, test, deploy into production for changes to the website, for fixes to the website. So in the big data world, sort of a similar model is needed to deliver data ops, and this is about building, testing, and deploying continuous improvement of the data platform that supports continuous improvement to a set of analytical models. And the data leader needs to facilitate and govern that model in order to sort of get the most value. So I talked earlier about how a vision without a plan is just an idea. So it therefore goes without saying that to deliver a strategy, you actually need to take some steps to deliver it. And the best approach for getting rapid, and find a best approach for sort of getting rapid and continuous improvement. One difficulty organizations have, and I was talking about this earlier on the panel, is deciding what to do first, what to prioritize, to know what to go after, and which things are going to get the most return. So the role of this leader, the make it happener, is about coming up with an approach and a methodology that enables you to have a sort of strategic backlog of use cases, help prioritize those, put a methodology in place that enables sort of fast, iterative improvements and fast, iterative ways of getting stuff done. I've already touched on the sort of data ops concept just before. And the data leader's role in overseeing this is required to create this sort of agile, iterative, and always improving methodology, due to the nature of how sort of data, sort of getting value from data and models comes about. So sort of imagine a predictive model, I guess, where it's sort of 50% accurate in terms of its prediction, which isn't good enough, and it needs to be better. And through some sort of proof of concepts, it was identified that with the addition of weather data, we can get that 50% to 70%. Now, the traditional sort of route for moving data around an organization is create a project, create a budget approval, go through some sort of governance committee, find the sources, create some integration routines, get that approved to put into production, all that sort of stuff. Now, that sort of waterfall and slow approach doesn't really work when, if we can be 20% more accurate, we can put 2, 10, 50 million pounds in the till, whatever it may be. So new approaches are needed of how to sort of iterate quickly and fast, because the most important thing is extracting the value from the data, not around some sort of perfect route to production, if you like. So getting shit done is one of the best ways of being successful. The disruptors in the world are awesome at continual improvement and getting stuff done, and they make gains and they stay there. All the blockers, all the politics, all the sort of arduous process that exists in many organizations, certainly established ones, can be a killer for innovation in big data. So this leader needs to find a way of crafting their way to success. There's no sort of steps to follow, if you like. So the regulator, which I struggle to say without thinking about Warren G's song, The Regulator. But, safety and security of sort of corporate data obviously is of sort of paramount importance. And that's sort of regardless of the industry that you're in. Clearly there's some more sort of heavily regulated industries, but actually security and safety of data is really key. And it's vital that this leader, the regulator, is really close and clear to the regulations required to satisfy and assure that industry, that company's regulatory requirements or their data. And they need to be really close to things like, I guess, Brexit, that could potentially change the laws that govern the use of data within an organization. So they need to be really close to that. With end consumer businesses, within consumers, there needs to be this sort of value exchange where they give personal information or you give personal information and allow the business to therefore track their behaviors, track their purchases, track their habits. But in return, what they expect back is A, better products and services, otherwise why bother, but also that they trust the organization, that they're going to treat their business, their data well, and be really transparent about how they're going to use it and what they're going to do with it. So this leader needs to be really clear on rules that protect customer data, for example, through things like the Data Protection Act. In highly regulated businesses, like the finance sector, there's loads of laws that govern the sort of the capture, the storage, the use, the auditability of data. So people in the heavily regulated businesses need to understand the regulation that impacts on the design and use of data platforms. This all needs to be fed into the plans and designs of the big data strategy, and the leader needs to ensure that this is really understood and cared for. It's an important part of a data strategy, and their role is to help make this an important thing that people understand. And what you don't want to do is wait for a problem to occur to then make it something that you need to think about. So the last guy is the talent manager. So for many organizations, a lot of the skills that you need in order to do big data, whatever that term means, is quite new. And therefore, the definition of things like roles, the selection of the team that you need, the career development program that you need to put in place for these new skills and new teams is not always sufficient. If you don't have a digital team already, then you may not have Python skills that you might need around the place. If you've never had sort of an analytics team, then you haven't got a data science and an analytics career path for the analysts that you might bring into the organization. If you've only just heard of Hadoop, then you don't know how to write a big data engineer job spec. So what's needed is a leader that can sort of get under what's needed to deliver the strategy, seek out the right people, that could be internally, that could be new hires, and then sort of shape a culture and a development program that allows the strategy to be implemented. The development program also needs to take into account the sort of ever-increasing desire for organizations to invest in sort of data strategies and exploit data in new ways and generate new revenue streams. So this means that the market is hugely buoyant in and competitive in sort of people that want to do really cool stuff with data and get loads of value from it. So the organizations need to be aware when working on these sorts of initiatives to need to continually find interesting work and interesting projects and programs for the team to go after. Whether that's sort of a recommendation engine or a model that they need to develop to drive some sort of improvement in the operations. So there's a lot of sort of leadership needed, a lot of different facets to leadership, lots of different personas. And yes, it can be sort of tough to find a single leader that wears all those hats all the time and work and sort of win on all the fronts. They've got to be strategy through to execution, tech through to data science, change through to talent management. I suppose the good news is that there's a growing body of people who not only have the prerequisite experience to move into this space, but there's also like a growing population of people that have done this stuff already. So know what it takes to go from sort of an idea through to inception and implementation and ongoing improvements. So for many organizations are sort of tackling this challenge through the introduction of a chief data officer, or the CDO, which is sort of rather unhelpfully also the chief digital officer, but in this instance, it's the D is data. There's loads of sort of people playing in the data space in all organizations with differing views and objectives and working styles of how things need to be done. It's often sort of pieced together, and when that sort of happens, you end up with a situation where generally people start focusing on technology as the problem or the thing that we need to sort, which may or may not be true. So bringing in a CDO is a very effective answer to sort of bring this whole sort of mess together, if you like, and craft a strategy and deliver the most value. There's sort of a growing trend, and most of the analyst organizations, sort of Gartners and Forresters and 451s of this world, who agree that, that this trend of having chief data officers will continue, and that both sort of large enterprise and small, medium businesses can get value from that. The evidence is already showing that the higher performing organizations have a higher percentage of the organizations that are high performing have CDOs versus those that are sort of performing slightly less. So the idea of the chief data officer is to take overall accountability for the management and exploitation of data, with the aim to sort of drive incremental business value from that data. They need to bring the organization on a journey and drive the agenda sort of top down. There needs to be a disruptive influence within the organization and do things differently. And they need to sort of bring this sort of level of agile leadership that we was talking about earlier to the table that can help drive a really important data ethic. In the same way that you have somebody who runs marketing, somebody who runs finance, somebody who runs supply chain, you need someone who runs data. If data is left to individual parts of the business with good intention, that will become siloed. It often becomes there's often duplication, there's often increased risk in not delivering on all of the regulatory and compliance things that you need to do within the organization because it's not considered and consolidated. And you need to treat data sort of with care and as an asset so that we can get all the value we want to get from it and drive out better improvements to products and services. So ultimately the CDO is a business exec. So we're at a relatively tech-focused conference, but the CDO is a business role. They aren't normally a deep technical person or a programmer or a data scientist. They do have technical knowledge, though, about this space, about data, about analytics, and its potential as an asset to an organization. They need to be T-shaped, so they need to sort of have broad skills around change management and understanding of business drivers and be able to collaborate across the business, but a deep knowledge in information management and governance and data solutions and methods and tools to get the job done with data. Ultimately, the CDO needs to be a mix of all of the sort of different personas I talked about, but depending on the background of that CDO and the type of organization, they may be more focused in a couple of those areas than others, clearly. So putting a CDO in place is a really good first step and shows good intent by an organization. I think that helps with the sort of hearts and minds internally, and that someone's got responsibility to sort this stuff out. And often organizations start with a part-time chief data officer to get the ball rolling, and once they get traction, sort of formalize that role. Often the CDO will be born out of, say, marketing or finance or digital, where those people are data-centric by nature and have sort of stepped up and created a data culture in their area and then can move to sort of make that across the enterprise. However, obviously, the answer isn't just recruit a CDO, and what you need is a mix of leadership skills to sort of get to the sort of a place that you want to be. So as with many things, new things, I guess, and change programs, big data is actually a team sport. Yes, there's a CDO, potentially, but what you need is a bunch of disruptive, innovative, and entrepreneurial leaders within the organizations, and a bunch of passionate sort of architects and engineers and analysts who can focus on sort of winning in this game. This could be just one or two people. This doesn't need to be an army of people at first, but it's about having that right mix of capability. There's loads of overlap between all of the different skills I talked about. So I sort of talked about them quite siloed, but actually this is sort of a meld and sort of Venn diagram of skills that you need to build up within the organization. The principles remain the same regardless of how you approach this, which is having effectively an artist that's capable of blending all of these skills together in a world of sort of science and maths that can continually identify opportunities and add value through the exploitation of data. So I'll end with introducing myself, which I didn't do at the start. I'm CEO and founder of an organization called Cynozure, and I set up this consultancy business to help organizations join what this conference calls the data revolution, which I love, and go on the big data journey. Speaking to loads of organizations, it's recognized that there is a gap in organizations knowing what to do, where to start, and how to get traction and actually start delivering. We have a sort of background in industry, so I previously headed up big data and analytics and marketing as well, solutions for Marks and Spencers. So we've sort of got real-world experience about what it feels like to start with an idea of wanting to do something with data and taking it through both sort of sign-off and corporate stuff you need to do to get things approved, all the way through to sort of delivery and execution and value out the back of it. So we know how to get some stuff done. I've got a whole bunch of scars about doing loads of things wrong. Like this one was starting with Hadoop before anyone else had done it, and this one was going with Cloudera before they really early version, so that it wasn't quite ready for sort of production, but which also obviously helps us understand the sorts of things and the watch-outs. We try and surround ourselves with a whole bunch of people and partners and customers that share our passion for data, which is really important to us and how it can really make a difference. So I'd love to talk to anyone about the challenges that resonate in this presentation, love to talk about the opportunities that data can present. We also have this thing, and I've nearly finished my plug, by the way. We also have this proposition called the virtual chief data officer. So I mentioned that organizations often start with a part-time chief data officer or part-time leader in this space. So we can come in and help with the strategy and help get things moving. It's a network, so I'm also looking for CDOs and aspiring CDOs or heads of analytics, heads of data to join that network to help with the proposition also. So with that, plug over and presentation over. And I think we've got 3 minutes. So I suppose depending on how long the questions are, 1, 2, or 3 questions, I suppose. Is there any questions?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yep.
Well, you mentioned the fact that a company needs to be willing to change, of course. What if there's just resilience to change? Is there any hope for that?
So is the question for organizations that just aren't willing to change, is there any
Yes,
hope?
I mean, if there's lots of resistance.
Yeah, gotcha.
Is it just a lost battle, or maybe in time things will change? What's your experience?
My experience is that in order to drive change, now whether this leads to change is sort of dependent on sort of the execution of it, I guess, but in order to drive change, lots of small little things are needed. It's not like one big thing and overnight people have changed and the tanker has turned, if you like. So lots of small techniques sort of employed around showing people the value, proof of concepts to show some sort of business improvement, having sort of multiple champions around the place, as I talked about. So there's lots of small things that you need to do to drive the change. And I've seen that successfully work in businesses where there's a crew of sort of people who get that data is really important, and those people collaborate in order to sort of drive that agenda and move the needle.
Yes, do you see any fundamental difference between the notion of change and the idea of transformation?
Sorry, what's the question? Say again?
Do you see any difference between the idea of change and the idea of transformation? Or are they one and the same?
I guess they could be one and the same. I mean, transformation is sort of a big word for lots of change, I guess. I personally don't think loads of change at once, and therefore transformation is necessarily helpful all the time. As I say, lots of small incremental improvements and moving needles in lots of different places tends to drive change. So it could be one and the same. I think it depends on the organisation. Sometimes the word transformational change helps an organisation to go, right, we are changing now, and therefore they can change course and change direction. Sometimes it's just an sort of unhelpful word that makes things sound broad and elaborate, and really it's just a bunch of change under the surface that's needed. Yeah? Okay, thank you very much.